Okay, it's my tremendous pleasure to have Professor Sohail Inayatullah joining me today, a renowned academic and futurist, most famous for introducing and pioneering the futures technique of causal layered analysis. Also the author of several books, and the topic of our conversation today will be one of his more recent books, PROUT and Power. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much. Great to be here, Karun.
You have some other books kind of in this space, shall we say. You've written a book called Understanding Sarkar, Neo-Humanist Educational Futures is another one. This is obviously an area of interest to you. Could you tell us a bit about PROUT, just to introduce our people out there? What is this thing, PROUT? What is this neo-humanist thing? And what's moved you to write this book?
So in terms of the personal context, I was doing my PhD in Hawaii, and I was going to write it on PROUT. And my PhD examiner, Johan Galtung, my supervisor with Jim Dater, Michael Shapiro, he looked at it and said, no, you're doing PROUT a disservice. You really need to do something on PR Sarkar. He's one of the most important thinkers in human history. Given that, you need to map him, situate him, in a way that other academics, other global thinkers can understand him and have access to him. So I had my PhD proposal. He took it, he just threw it in the garbage. That's what I think of your proposal. I said, Johan, the defense is 24 hours from now. He goes, that's quite enough time to write 30, 40 pages. Start now, leave and start. And so that was the kind of challenge. He says, don't take this lightly. We need to compare Sarkar, the best Chinese thinkers, the best Islamic thinkers, the best Indian thinkers, the best Western thinkers. And he's one of the most imaginative and, in his view, far-reaching and full of insights about the future and history, and take this seriously. So that PhD became a book called Understanding Sarkar.
Yeah.
And it was really trying to legitimize him, place him in the Indian context and macro history, and very much in terms of epistemology. So it was a very scholarly book. And I tried to publish it, and it didn't get published. And finally, Brill, which is the second oldest publisher in the world, took it. So I was thrilled. That was my first book on Sarkar.
Yeah. So mystic, macro historian, as you've said, propounder of this socio-economic theory called PROUT, neo-humanist philosophy. What's... just if you can give us a bit of a nutshell. I know there's about 30 books that are PROUT in a nutshell, so it's a big task, I know. But just
let's in terms of today's context, because it's always good to be relevant. So today we see a wave of what you might say fascism going on in the world. You say, well, are you saying that as a way? Often people think they don't like this, say that's fascist. But if we be technical, first part of fascism is corporatist. That means we support profits only for large corporations. PROUT is not that. PROUT's saying, well, actually, the best way to create prosperity is through cooperatives, meaning the employees own the business, they work together, they create prosperity for themselves and for all. So it's the opposite of corporate fascism. The second thing about fascism, it's very clear one group is above the rest. If you have Islamic fascism, it's Muslims better than others. If you have what's called the alt-right American fascisms, it's those particular Christian groups above others. If you have Nazi National Socialism, that was very much Germans above Jews and etc. So PROUT is the opposite. There's no above. Indeed, we're a human family, and the metaphor Sarkar used, we're on a caravan, on a journey, and everyone's going to be part of it. The second definition that's antithesis to fascism is there's no above or below here. We're primarily human beings living in something that's recent called nation states, something that's recent called the world capitalist system, all from the 15th, 16th, 17th century. Those structures have come, and PROUT argues they'll disappear. So that's definitional too, the corporatism and the identity.
Yeah.
So those are two ways to start on it, to say, well, that's not PROUT. PROUT's the opposite.
One of the things I guess I'm really participating in at the moment is this new economy movement. And you've mentioned, obviously, the cooperative aspects of PROUT, which are also very fundamental to this new economy movement. I mean, it's interesting. We call this thing the new economy, but of course, as people point out, we could look to pre-capitalism as much as post-capitalism in this whole new economy movement. And it really interests me, I think, one of the really important, valuable contributions of PROUT, I think, is that it's not coming from this Western paradigm, isn't it? Is it? I mean, it's talking to that very much, but it's outside of that.
So that really goes to the third part of in terms of what's fascist, right? So PROUT is different, as exactly what you said. There's a spiritual dimension, and this is not spirituality in terms of it's evidence-based spirituality. So Sarkar always talked about scientific spirituality, meaning we're doing practices where there's evidence-based. Is there evidence-based for meditation? Yes, there is. We know hospital resource use drops if you use meditation. We know people who are aging live longer if they meditate. We know in terms of IQ scores, they do better. There's a whole range of things where meditation enhances productivity, if you will. Now, the tension here in all is with this identity, spirituality, practice is, can you have, and this was the old question that the socialists had, can you have an island of PROUT in a sea of capitalism? Can you have an island of deep globalization in a sea of nation states? Can you have an island of spirituality in an ocean of materialism? So that becomes the big tension we're all in. So we want to imagine a PROUT world, global world, spiritual world, gender equity, post-capitalist world, and yet our day-to-day experience is the opposite.
Yeah.
And the wave we're seeing today is the opposite. So that creates tension in me, creates tension in others. So how do we both challenge the current system and create something new?
Yeah.
So the language I like from Futures, this is horizons thinking. So Horizon 3 is imagining this PROUT world. I mean, I work with progressive people all over the world at every level. Whether it's Asia Development Bank, whether it's a small NGO, whether it's international policing, everyone imagines a far more progressive world that's global, that's ethical, that has, in Sarkar's language, money is rolling. It's moving, it's not stuck. So that's kind of Horizon 3, people imagining this different world. Now, Horizon 1 is like, we're stuck in a world capitalist system with nation states. To start to imagine Sarkar saying, we'll have a world without visas, think, how is that even possible, right? Do we even want a world without visas? What's my limits on that? So that becomes this, this compelling image of what can be. And Horizon 1 is the day-to-day struggles. For example, we know cooperatives are actually, in terms of the quantitative evidence, very big. I don't have the data with me, but it's more than 20-30% of the world economy.
Yeah.
And yet the attention I know in my life, I look at markets. I look at colleagues. We look at markets. I was the friend from the 1970s in Hawaii, and we were talking about markets. So markets grab our attention. They're exciting. Or what in spirituality, the monkey mind likes it. It's difference every time. Cooperatives are kind of boring, right? We're sitting around. So, is it that we make cooperatives more sexy? We make them more like Apple, so everyone's interested. How is your cooperative doing? Is that the solution? Or do cooperatives need global legislative protection? So they're privileged the way corporations are? But those are some of the debates in terms of making the shift towards Horizon 2, which is more of a PROUT world in 5, 7, 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. That's kind of how I'm trying to frame this.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in looking to how, people in similar movements, and I guess the commons transition movement is an interesting example of this.
Yeah,
we have people like Michelle Bounds who are talking quite clearly about this, about the market, about the commons, about government, and I think that's something again in PROUT that it's actually spelt out really quite, with a great amount of elegance in terms of, that certain areas of the economy, can exist and should exist as in a market, whereas there's so would you talk to that a little bit?
Okay, so the confusion many people have, PROUT is not against markets. Markets is efficient allocation of resources, competencies, and capabilities. It's when markets become hugely distorted. So it's when the money gets stuck. So the PROUT contributions ensure the money keeps rolling, and two, it's not just a minimum but a maximum. Now some people say, "Oh my God, but that's not fair. I want to be able to make $1 trillion." Well, do you? Do you really need $1 trillion? I'm okay with 5, 10, even 20 million. But how do you really need 1 trillion? So the notion is that the circulation is far more likely, and the Sanskrit word he uses is prama, dynamic balance. It's not the Gandhian balance where everyone gets poorer. This is dynamic balance. This is taking desire seriously. The old way is let's get rid of desire and stay at a certain GDP. No, we're using desire to create more products, more services, more possibilities. So we're moving from agriculture to industrial to the post-industrial to a proud global world economy, which has greater prosperity, greater productivity, greater conservation of nature, greater gender equity.
Yeah.
It's really saying as best of all worlds as possible. And what's different with PROUT with other movements is they're anti-technology. This is saying, no, we will use the new technology, whether it's genomics, proteinomics, whether it's artificial intelligence, we're going to use them, but the goal isn't that everyone now works 30 hours a day. The goal is that new technologies, they allow us to work less, and we're seeing that. But this is artificial intelligence supported. So that enhances capability. Meditation enhances capability. The weights and the structures that are stopping us is overprivileging of the corporatist, overprivileging of the nation state, and overprivileging of identities that are narrow.
Yeah.
So if we can work on those three, reducing corporatism, reducing nation state, and reducing what you might say congealed identities instead of expansive identities, we're well on our way. So Michelle's work is saying, okay, this is happening, and it can happen through expanding, creating the new global commons.
Yeah.
You can do that through what he calls platform cooperatives. So a concrete example, I've worked with a lot of NGOs, global NGOs, who are, kind of saving the world stuff, right? You name them. And now what's happening is funding for them from each nation state is dropping. So what do? You have costs everywhere. So can we create a platform where all the global NGOs work together, share resources? That starts to create a global platform. We have platforms like Uber, which reduce inefficiencies of resources around transport. Can we have platforms that enhance cooperation? Now to do that, great idea, we need legislation that supports it, and there's a whole kind of inner work. So PROUT is not like traditional materialistic worldviews. No, just do it. The objective world change and everything's okay. We know that's not the case.
Yeah.
I walk in a situation, I don't know how to cooperate. I need to learn how to cooperate. I have to have higher emotional intelligence. That's learned. And I think that's what, experiments fail. Okay, that cooperative failed. The conclusion isn't cooperative sucked. The conclusion is I didn't have the emotional intelligence to figure it out. And that's a learned behavior. I didn't have support.
Yeah. I'd like to come back to that, what you're talking about there, beyond materialism and that work, internal work, which is part of PROUT. But just to say a little bit more with... I guess, prefiguring, this, I'm just interested, obviously we have a lot of work, I guess, being done where, people are trying to get organized to, whether it's within the existing system, I guess, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Whereas I really see PROUT having a really useful contribution to make towards, this transnational movement that is prefigurative rather than, so you're talking before about, the islands of PROUT here and there.
Yes.
I guess backcasting, which I know is one of your futurist tools, from a PROUT future, getting there is much more likely, I think, to happen through this grassroots kind of movement of, linking up with, transnationally. What are your thoughts on that?
It's both.
Opposed to...
It's both. I remember 20, 30 years ago, we'd have discussions on a greener planet, right? And the notion it's easier in democratic countries, you can get social movements together. Now, then you see a country like China where the premier or president agrees, and then suddenly we've seen in the last 10 years, 30, 40% move towards renewables.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's grassroots, sometimes it's simply the old ways don't work and leadership sees it.
Yeah.
And that's prefigured by intellectuals, by thought leaders saying, wait, here's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
So part of it is a paradigm revolution, and that revolution is actually, we're in the middle of it.
Mhm.
PROUT is not like some weird thing 50 years from now. We're actually in the middle of the transition.
Yeah.
So transition one is gender equity. And we're seeing that battle in the US. We're seeing it won in New Zealand. Australia's far. Okay, let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
Battle two is this climate change. Let's create a greener planet through renewables. We're in the middle of that, and that's a possible victory. Battle three is tougher. Can we imagine a post-corporatist world where there's greater equity without losing desire to innovate and actually incentivize people to do more?
Yeah. Well,
That battle is further up, my sense.
Yeah.
And the fourth battle, this global governance,
Mm.
EU is a great example of a possible victory. Now, you may say you don't like the EU, it's too neoliberal. That's fine. I don't even worry about that. It's an imagination of greater, broader identity. So that's our process. Can we start to imagine? So my new book, Asia 2038, which follows on Proud and Power, was, okay, what would Asia look like in a confederation? What are the rules we need today for Asia Confederation? And when we looked at them, oh my God, they're all the PROUT rules.
Yeah.
It's gender equity. It's movement of goods, services, and people. It's using greater data, artificial intelligence. It's ensuring climate change is responded to. It's ensuring refugees have the right for safe passageways. It's ensuring global mediation, regional mediation, regional arbitration, all the things we want to see in PROUT regional movements. But, okay, this is interesting. Asia's moving in a direction, so PROUT becomes a kind of a big holder. Here are some progressive ideas. So some people say, well, there's no evidence of a third movement, beyond capitalism and communism. Well, that's not true. There actually is. Sarkar was writing about this in the 50s. The things he talked about, we're seeing those imaginations today. I remember reading an article where he starts to talk about mind and machine. What would mind and machine look like? That's a 1958 article. Now, suddenly in 2018, that makes sense. That's advanced artificial intelligence. But this was his imagination of a different world, and many others, but Sarkar is the key person in that. So PROUT becomes this imagination. Part of us understanding that is this technological shift, it's a paradigm shift, all the things we're seeing. That doesn't mean it's there. We're not there. I can see in my own life, we're right in the middle. But to say there's another transition, that's the argument I challenge, that we are in this transition, even if on day-to-day, given American politics, it doesn't look so inspiring, or other politics.
Yeah, for sure.
Or politics in Pakistan, for example.
Yeah. Just related to that, this, I guess, a bit of a movement towards universal basic income, and that's something that's very Proutist as well, isn't it? The providing of the minimum essentials of life for all human beings. Do you see that as a part of this?
Yeah, it's foundational. I mean, I've been watching that idea now for decades, and it was considered a wacky, weird idea. For PROUT, it was having purchasing capacity, a kind of a base globally, right? And then people go, oh, that's really strange. Why would you do that? Let those who can work hard. And now suddenly with AI here, and we see forecasts from ILO, World Economic Forum, all saying we anticipate 40% unemployment. ILO says 90% of current jobs in Southeast Asia will disappear. 90%. So given that, what do? Option one is young males without work, no meaning. What are they likely to do? Option two is, okay, we need a universal basic income, either whether it's through taxation, whether it's through incentivization, whatever the means are, where there's a basic support. Now, the third argument, which I accept as well, is not just avoiding blood in the streets. Actually, with the UBI, people are more productive because there's a sense of security. I'm in Honolulu right now, and I can see the insecurity here compared to Australia in terms of level of homelessness. This fear about insurance, health insurance. And you see those in many countries we see as a norm. Everyone should have the right to a home, right to health insurance. So that was Sarkar said, those are the basics. Once you have those, you can start to go for more. So UBI is an example of what seemed like a faraway idea, Horizon 3, now has entered Horizon 2.
Yeah.
There's experiment on experiment. Some work, some don't work, some really work well. But my conclusion is this will get more refined, and by 2030, 2040, we will live on a planet where that's the norm. I can't imagine a future without that. In fact, I would say it's the inevitable future.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now let's. Well, it's not a shift really. It's just a different aspect of this this whole conversation is what you have described in your book as yoganomics. Now, of course, yoga is not just, for our listeners out there, is not just some weird postures where people stick their heads up their bums. It's yoga, of course, means union, and it's as you said before, it's in Sarkar's framework, it's evidence-based spirituality. So, yeah, in terms of, I guess, some of the challenges around which you've pointed out and which I've certainly experienced in, I guess, various expressions of the suicidal tendencies of the left, shall we say. In terms of this internal mastery, how important is this that we do this internal work, or that we have some framework here of evidence-based spirituality?
So, for me, part one is this critical self-reflection. The notion of yoga as I'm watching myself. So there's an observer that's looking, am I being ethical? Am I being wise? So there's a kind of watching self observation. And the second part of yoga that's crucial, again, I was at International Bank a week ago, and I was with a panel with the president and some other kind of thought leaders. And his question was, what should the bank be financing? So this was crucial. So I said, well, the data is you've been financing stuff rightly or wrongly that's led to enhanced congestion and difficulty in Asian cities. So we understood you want to develop, modernize, meaning more cars, more roads. We get that argument. In 2018 to 2030, what should the bank be financing? And so then, well, shouldn't we be financing smart, green Asian cities? Yeah, that makes sense. Shouldn't we be financing gender equity? Yes, that makes sense. And suddenly, in terms of the PROUT idea of this better world, it made sense. Upstream, we have to finance that. Now, his comment was, that's great, but we should be using Asian wisdom. He said, we shouldn't just be jumping on this, Western stuff. We should be looking. I said, well, if that's the case, then let's look at our core traditions. If we see yoga as an asset for all of Asia, whether Islamic or Buddhist or Shinto, I'm not so worried about that. It's an Asian asset. Then what from yoga helps us? One is this mindfulness. The second was the stillness. And the third is this flexibility. So if I'm a head of an organization, the argument is I need all those three. As everything changes, how do I stay still? Because people freak out all the time in large organizations. How do I stay still? Doesn't matter who they are, left, green, right, center, doesn't matter. We freak out.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I want to go toward this beautiful vision. To do that, life changes. There's new rivers created. There's new roadblocks. And that's the flexibility. The yoga practice leads to personal flexibility, economic flexibility. It's practical, it's pragmatic. And there's stillness, and there's this critical mindfulness. So then suddenly it looked at me, okay, here's a yoga of economics. Let's use yoga as a metaphor for what type of economic system we want. As well, yoga, everyone's included. You can be 90 or you can be young. You're invited. It's not like yoga is just for the elite select few. This is, again, Sarkar's idea. The economic system has to have benefits for all.
Yeah.
And it can have more benefits for those who are more productive or innovative. We have no problem with that. But they can't be getting incentives that then de-incentivize the work for the rest. It creates so much inequity where the only solution is, actually the inequity doesn't work either, because then you have homelessness on your street. How can you enjoy your day if there's people outside, living on the street? That's one of the best evidences of a bad system. Something's wrong. Or there's, so this is kind of, yoga is inclusive.
And yeah, yoga in terms of, again, Sarkar's framing, as I understand it as well, it's about that internal service and internal mastery and service to life, isn't it? So there's, you're talking about people homeless on the street. How can anyone really have any, true deep sense of spiritual fulfillment when outside their door there's people, starving and suffering? That's that's
Well, you
an
hit the
integral
next
part.
part there, which is really about the way I would see, the way you're framing it is the service to the planet. The other kind of a core part of new humanism is relationship with the earth. And this we see many great biology, it's kind of the ecological, the Gaian futurists saying, well, the old model was industrial. Let's imagine a paradigm for economics or earth that's Gaian, meaning the planet is, quote, in brackets, alive. If it's alive, what's its purpose? Clearly, it's the base for us. There's always this debate, you need roads, but you need nature as well. It's a nature-oriented planet. But that ends up with the debate about measurements.
Yeah.
So for the PROUT system to work, it's keeping the accountants happy. Otherwise, interesting idea, if the accountants are happy, we count what we count. So my conclusion was we need 4 measurements. Measure 1 is prosperity. And Sarkar talks about the standard of living. More electricity, more access to internet, more food, etc. Access 2 is this deep inclusion. So everyone's involved. 3 is essentially the notion of spirituality. So that the measurement is how people feel this happiness index. And 4th is really the environment, so sustainability. So then the measurement in terms of a measurable, progressive direction of the global economy, how is it doing on all 4?
Yeah.
Are we more prosperous? Tick, great. Are we more inclusive? Look at is board membership more gender equitable? Are we more kinder or just towards nature? Tick. Is spirituality a way of seeing that creates awe, that creates happiness? Are we increasing there? So those are 4 kind of ticks. So that means it's measurable, keeps the accountants happy. So GDP we know keeps only 1/4 of that does well. The other 3 parts don't.
Yeah.
So I would want a PROUT vision with PROUT measurable, quantifiable indicators.
I imagine probably you would see, Kate Raworth's the donut economics stuff.
Yeah.
Expression of that, yeah.
Yeah. So this is linking vision to something that's metrics based. Now I can imagine someone who does yoga meditation all the time is, well, they're beyond metrics, they're beyond measurement. It's fantastic. That's their inner world cannot be measured. But the implication of that on the external world can be. Is there less violence?
Yeah.
Are people focused on a well-being health system, or is it focused on illness health system? So most of the hospitals I work with, they're trying to make that transition as well. How do we make it patient-centered, personalized medicine instead of this aggregate medicine that's more system-centered? So I think PROUT is part of that, this kind of movement towards a better world.
Yeah. So, yes. And, starting to wind up, thank you so much for your time. It's fantastic to be talking about this, which I'm so passionate about. But, we obviously, you've touched on a lot of this, but we have obviously climate change. We have, the rise of the far right. There's obviously plenty of concerning indicators that we can point to, but I really liked in your book as well, you're pointing towards 7 positive trends amidst the doom and gloom. Could you, let's finish on a bright note. I mean, there's been lots of bright notes in this conversation, which again, I'm very grateful for, but please speak to some of those trends.
So if we step back a bit, remember Sarkar was a macro historian. Historian is collecting data about what we know, macro historian is patterning it. So part of that pattern, if you look at the work of Toynbee, he says every civilization is dealt a major challenge. How it responds to that challenge creates the next phase in human history. So climate change, politics of the far right, those are two of the critical challenges we're seeing. So Sarkar's view is they're part of this transition. They have to be met. And meeting those challenges create new paradigms, people with new leadership abilities. So some of the people elected in the new American House of Representatives, that's an example of that. So here's people who are now developing these capabilities to do something greater. That's a good news story. Now, in terms of other good news stories, there's doom and gloom difficulties, but really, if you look at climate change in Asia, we know trillions-dollar assets will disappear, so there's not an incentive. If only way to solve climate change in Asia is for a regional confederation. So we're seeing that start to emerge. So those new governance structures get created out of the challenge. So scenario one from a challenge, it's too difficult, we disappear, we're resigned to defeat. Scenario two, which was always Sarkar, is you use the challenge to create the next phase in human history. The inequity we're seeing everywhere on the globe, that becomes the challenge for a better global, more productive system with greater equity. Now, the other part that's intriguing was enhanced people getting more involved in meditation, in organic food, and looking for alternatives. So those become many of, here are things that are actually really positive. I remember there was the one piece I quoted was, happiness is a virus. So this is kind of a paradigm shift. Okay, happiness isn't just in me. I said, well, no, if you do scientific research, if you're happy and I'm happier, 7 people around us feel it. And you can measure it. I treat people differently. Someone else treats people differently. It spreads this, I feel better, they feel better.
Yeah.
Now, for PROUT systems, the issue is, well, how do I incentivize that? How do I structure it so spreading happiness is the norm? Now, for people who just believe, no, let's just change myself, PROUT is saying, no, we create systems, rules that make it the norm. If you go back, my favorite example is smoking was the norm 40, 50 years ago. It's not the norm because we've incentivized health. So PROUT in Power as a book says, let's imagine what a global PROUT system would look like, where PROUT ideals are in power, meaning they define reality. Meditation is the norm. Eating organic, healthy, or vegetarian food is the norm. You can still have your chicken, but the norm is veggie.
Yeah.
You can do what you want, but the norm changes. You may have many corporates, but the norm is cooperative.
Yeah.
So this is changing what counts as what's normal. PROUT in Power starts to imagine that. And the argument is we're seeing all those seeds of change. Yes, there's pendulums back and forth. Let's not be stupid. But the greater, longer trend is towards this different world system.
Yeah.
There's big roadblocks there. I'd be crazy not to mention them. How does the nation state transform? How do we develop these regional governance systems? How do we really develop a post-capitalist system? How do we make UBI global? I mean, those are all big-time issues. But every global I meet, what's stunning to me is global thought leaders, whether they're all working on that. Everyone's trying to figure that out. There's not like, oh, one day we'll wake up to a solution. People kind of develop policy solutions everywhere.
Yeah.
So when I see that, okay, this isn't 2090 or 2150. And Sarkar's quote, I remember, he says, a half hour before the success of the new system, you won't even know it. That's kind of, I'm still puzzled by that. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read most of his books 10, 15 times. And still, I read, okay, does that make sense? Does that not make sense? And often it doesn't make sense until there's a real shift in the world. Mind and machine was a silly idea, and suddenly I see, that's what he meant.
Yeah.
He meant really advanced AI. Global governance, well, what would global governance look like?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been really very nourishing for me to be able to speak about PROUT as straightforwardly as this with someone with all the experience that you have. I mean, I'm very inspired by what I consider, the echoes of PROUT, or in different names, and inspired by that work as much as the PROUT thing. But to be able to talk explicitly about PROUT is a real pleasure for me. So
people don't have to be proud orthodox.
No.
Our focus is to get the core proud ideas, the core proud ideas as the norm. They don't need to have a flag on them.
No.
That's that mindful part. Are we looking at the form or what's deeper behind it?
Of course.
And for Sarkar, he called that microvita. That's the key. The microvita is the energy that creates something new. So we're concerned in this conversation about the microvita that creates the novelty, not about whether there's a flag on it or not.
No.
That's kind of the unconscious politics. We've seen where unconscious politics leads us. Neither one of us want that world. We want something else.
No, I think we'd both run away from that flag if it was there. So.
Yeah. We want a planetary flag, if anything.
That's right.
And we welcome the Venetians if they decide to land, assuming they're nice and they want to hang out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again. I will leave some notes for people on how to stay in touch with you. But it's Metafuture.
Thank you so much. The PROUT book is available.
Metafuture.org, isn't it?
Yes. Metafuture.org. The book is there as well as from PROUT India.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. Bye.